This is week 2 of our series on co-design. My name is Agustina Gancia, and I lead the capacity building portfolio at Health Translation SA. And I'll be your host for this entire series, which spans over 4 weeks. And yes, welcome. So let me just click there. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the Ghana people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, which is where my feet are on today. And I acknowledge that some other attendees today are joining us from, well, one person from overseas, I know, but others from different regions. So please share with us where you're coming from. We recognize the Ghana people's cultural, spiritual, physical, and emotional connection with their land. We honor and pay our respects to Ghana elders, both past and present, and all generations of Ghana people now and into the future. So what's the Spotlight series? The Spotlight series is an initiative that HTSA launched a couple of years ago now. So I believe it was 2022. It's an initiative that is held quarterly, and it's designed to build our capacity around research translation, different aspects of research translation. So the different series that we've held so far were around implementation science, health economics, partnering with community members in research, establishing research and policy partnerships. We've had more Spotlight series, and they're all available on the HTSA website. So if you're interested in seeing what other topics we've covered, please feel free to go to our website. This initiative includes, over the span of 4 weeks, quarterly, as I've mentioned, a series of webinars. We share opportunities for training. We share online resources or articles or interesting websites and publications around the specific topic of interest. And so this specific Spotlight series is on the topic of co-design. Before we delve into the topic today, I just want to give a brief overview of who HTSA is, if you are not familiar with who we are and why we run these series. Our organization, HTSA, is a National Health and Medical Research Council accredited research translation center. And our aim is to offer a collaborative and cross-sectoral approach to research and the translation of evidence into patient care. So really, we try to connect key actors together to ensure that research that's being published is actually used in practice. And we have 11 partner organizations that span the whole of the health service delivery across South Australia. So that includes the universities, CSIRO, Commission on Excellence and Innovation in Health, SAMRI, which is where we are based, the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, PHNs, and Aboriginal Health Council of South Australia. So our vision, like I said, is to accelerate the translation of research findings into action as quickly as possible to ensure that the evidence can have a positive impact on the health of South Australians. And how do we do that? Well, through a variety of ways. We provide training, we connect with health services, research, and Spotlight series falls in the education and training bit of our work. Today, we had scheduled 3 speakers, but we only have 2. They are fantastic, and I think they'll have some, lots of rich information to share with us today, where we'll be delving into the benefits and challenges of doing co-design. And so we'll be hearing specifically from a designer, Tim, and Rebecca from Health and Wellbeing Queensland. So she is working in a research team within Health and Wellbeing Queensland. Before I begin, I would like to introduce you quickly to our speakers, and then hand over to Rebecca and then to Tim. And if anyone has any questions, just please put them into the chat or the Q&A box, and we can have a Q&A session afterwards after we listen to both speakers. So I'll quickly introduce you to the speakers. Rebecca is an Associate Clinical Prevention Manager at Health and Wellbeing Queensland. She's a dietitian with a background in digital communication and user experience design. She has a keen interest in health literacy, digital health, and helping people to live well at all stages, all ages and life stages. And Tim is a design director at WebSilk, and he helps tackle complex design problems through multifaceted lens of design and system-based thinking. So I will stop sharing and hand over to Rebecca.
Thanks very much. I'll just get my slides up. Okay, hoping that looks good from your side.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you very much for having me. I'd like to begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands from which we're all joining today. For me, I'm in Meanjin in Brisbane, which is the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal peoples, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. So I'm joining you from Health and Wellbeing Queensland, and we are Queensland's prevention agency. We're an independent statutory body, and we're within the health portfolio of the Queensland government. Our objective is to improve the health and wellbeing of the Queensland population by reducing health inequity and the burden of chronic diseases. And we do this by taking a systems approach through research and evidence and guided by community leadership. As part of our portfolio, we deliver a range of statewide prevention programs to support health behaviour change at an individual and community level. These programs also support the health system with appropriate prevention and early intervention referral options, which can in turn reduce the burden of chronic disease on the health system. So I'm here today to talk about one of our newest program, Pod Squad, which took a co-design approach, and to share some of the benefits, the challenges, and the learnings that we got along the way. So first, a little bit about Pod Squad. It's a free play-based wellbeing app designed to help kids and families to build healthy habits together. The content covers the topics of nutrition, physical activity, and sleep. And it's delivered through a whole range of different interactive and playful pieces of content for kids and for parents and carers. So we at Health and Wellbeing Queensland developed this program in partnership with researchers at the University of Queensland. And we also engaged a creative agency to deliver the content and the technical production. So Pod Squad launched in July of last year. And since then, it's been downloaded over 14,000 times, which we're really thrilled about. Certainly, we look forward to seeing that grow, and evaluation is a very big part of our next steps with the program. But so far, it's been well received. Pod Squad targets primary school age children, so sort of that 5 to 12-year-old age range, and their families, of course. Our early feedback shows that it has the strongest appeal to 5 to 8-year-olds. And when we're working with an audience like this, co-design is so incredibly valuable because if we aren't able to connect with kids and demonstrate the value to parents, it's not going to go anywhere. So co-design was very central to our approach, and we had more than 300 kids and their families participate throughout the program's development. In addition to stakeholders within the health system and outside of the health system as well. And just a little bit briefly about why. Why do we create this program? In Queensland, it was identified that there was a critical gap in the health system for an offering which supports families with health behaviour change, with a vision of targeting chronic disease prevention. And our foundational research showed that digital interventions were effective with enhancing the delivery of this type of information. And it emphasized the importance of co-design to deliver something that is really appropriate for kids and families. So that's where our journey began. Pod Squad takes a whole of family approach. So as I mentioned, we have content for kids and for their parents and carers. Children learn through play and they build their knowledge and skills over time by engaging with the program, but really importantly, by taking what they've learned and implementing it or trying it out in the real world. And then that feeds back into the app. So it's short bursts of online learning with emphasis on real world behavior change. And for parents, their experience complements what their child is doing and supports that parent to role model positive behaviors and create a supportive environment at home. And I will just point out that while Pod Squad is a digital first program, we also have a range of offline resources because we recognize that this sort of implementation won't work for every family, particularly when we're in a state like Queensland and we have many families living in very remote areas, perhaps without the internet connectivity or the appropriate devices. So that's a big thing for us moving forward. So as part of the process, in working with researchers at UQ and with our creative agency, we undertook a design thinking approach. And Tim, you might be able to talk to this as well, but design thinking is a human-centered design concept which involves a non-linear and iterative process. So teams use this to better understand their end users, to challenge assumptions, to redefine problems and to create innovative solutions. So in public health, to our knowledge, it's not particularly common. It's more so common in fields such as engineering, design, and architecture. And it's really valuable when you're designing something that's like an end product for your users. So we combined design thinking, which has a strong co-design approach through every part of its process. We combined this with behavior change theory to guide us throughout our development. So at every step of the journey, we undertook co-design and user experience design and user testing to validate our approach and to build confidence as we went along the process. So from the outset, before we even knew what we were creating, we undertook foundational research with UQ to understand expectations from a parent and from a health professional perspective. Then in our discovery phase, where we tried to nut out exactly what we're trying to achieve and what it might look like, parents, carers, and kids were all involved in that process through things like workshops, through focus groups, some creatively designed for kids, which you can see a photo of that on the screen. And that helped us to better understand our audience, to work alongside our different stakeholders so that we had a shared vision of where we were going with this. Kids and families were actively engaged through a whole host of different activities throughout development, and they included things like surveys, focus groups, interviews, and testing the product as it was being developed. As I mentioned earlier, we also engaged with stakeholders from all different sectors, health, education, you name it, in order to check our assumptions along the way. And I've already mentioned, so we had over 300 families engaged in this process. And at every turn, we did our best to reflect Queensland's diversity because this program, we have been aspirational in our reach, but it needed to reflect the different families and the diversity of our population as best we could. So having a look at the co-design process and what we learned along the way, it was incredibly beneficial to the program and it guided us in every sense. So I would 100% take this process again. We would love to do more, which is always the case, but we're really happy that we committed and drove this concept forward. So as I mentioned, co-design informed the program even before project planning began. And I think that's really important in the concept of co-design. So it meant that we weren't coming with a solution in mind initially. Families and our stakeholders could help shape the program and tell us what they need rather than us solving it without consultation. So we weren't testing things after the fact at that point in the process. So co-design for us for this program informed how we delivered it. So as an app, as a digital tool, it informed the program's name, the whole storyline, the narrative that underpins it, the characters, the pieces of content, the interface of the app, and so much more. And this approach was really valuable because it helped us to increase the level of buy-in with our stakeholders. This is quite a novel approach for government, particularly. Doesn't look very governmenty. It's not a very governmenty approach. So it certainly enhanced that level of confidence from our stakeholders. It helped us to prioritize and make decisions when everything could be on the table. How do you make decisions? So this really was so valuable. And it supported us in moving forward with the approach we were taking. So working with kids, I think co-design was so valuable here because I am not a child, our team are not kids, we don't know, we're not in the minds of children. And so we needed to speak to them directly to understand what appeals to them, what do they like and not like. And I promise you, if you work with kids, they will tell you exactly what they like and don't like and where you've fallen short. So it really enhanced the program's creativity, our innovation, and helped us invest, I think, in the things that kids were really going to connect with. So some examples of what the kids helped us to do. They helped us to develop a range of really different storylines that underpin the program. And of course, they were wild and wacky and fantastic. And then after that process, the kids helped us to narrow down a preferred storyline and told us what we could do to improve that. So pulling elements of different concepts together for our agency to weave into something cohesive. Kids told us some specific things. So when we first showed them the concept, they said what is missing is some element of having something to overcome, a challenge or an adversary. And that was going to help them to connect into the storyline a little bit more. They also wanted something that was collectible. So if we think about other things kids like, there is that element of, Pokemon, you've got to catch them all. So what could we do to have these things that entice kids to engage in health content where it feels more playful than your typical health content? So this whole process made sure that the program felt really relevant to kids. We are finding it has more appeal to the younger audience, as I mentioned. But it meant that we were constantly challenging our own thinking and avoided what I think are common pitfalls when we're designing new programs or initiatives like this, which is design by committee. Where the adults in the room think that we know what's best, what's going to appeal to the kids, it cuts that out and it goes straight to the source. And I frequently engaging both families and stakeholders meant that we could really confirm our approach before we made significant investments in things such as the content production and the technical production. So it's not something that you do down the pipeline of production. The more you can do up front, the better use of your resources you can make. And we certainly found that with Pod Squad. As with all things, there are challenges that you can face. And for us, there were some hurdles to overcome. So it was our intention to lead on a lot of the co-design activities in-house at our agency. And that was going to enhance what our creative agency were delivering. So we had access to different cohorts through different organizations, which could open the doors to speaking with more diverse groups, doing more things on the ground. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and this was a huge, huge barrier for us. So not only lockdowns, of course, there were a big limitation on face-to-face gatherings, but we recognized that there was a shift in how people wanted to be consulted in the aftermath of COVID. There was more of an expectation for online engagement there were fewer opportunities for us to leverage or join in on existing face-to-face activities. So that was quite a roadblock. I think it's something in the future that we can address, but at the time, that was unfortunately very challenging. So that meant that a huge proportion of our co-design activities were conducted virtually, not all of them, but plenty, which was great because we have a statewide remit and Queensland is huge, but it also has drawbacks in terms of the level of engagement that you can get in a virtual environment, and also the degree of insight that you can gain when you're not necessarily able to read a lot of the visual cues or have a tactile tool or program to engage with. We also found that, and it will remain a challenge, to really actively engage with the wide audience that we're hoping to engage with, and ensuring that we're reflecting the needs and wants of such diverse populations. So the difference between a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old is significant. And then when you add to that the layer of the different needs of priority populations, people living in metro areas versus regional and remote areas, managing all of this in one product is a constant juggle, and it's constantly needing prioritization. And then another reflection, so from a government perspective, our creative agency were engaged to facilitate the co-design and to execute the program, which meant that that was fantastic because they were able to administer and deliver. They had a bigger team, and so we could do a lot more because the agency was leading it. However, at times this meant that as a government agency, we didn't always have the level of involvement that we might have wanted. So we weren't necessarily in the room in all of the activities. And in addition, because it was led by our creative agency, the findings from the co-design wasn't captured in our research program of work. So those outcomes won't be published necessarily in research papers. However, the development process that we undertook is getting published in a manuscript, which is hopefully going to be published very soon. So there are lots of opportunities in this space for Pod Squad and our other programs of work. We fully intend to expand Pod Squad, and co-design will be central to how we do this. And we've learned a lot along the way to shape how we move forward. So Health and Wellbeing Queensland and the University of Queensland will continue to work together on delivering more of the co-design activities in the next phase of work, which is really exciting for us. So we'll be travelling to different communities across Queensland so that we can do more of the face-to-face work with diverse audiences. And we also intend to use co-design to review and improve the content and functionality within the app that may not have had as much attention the first time around, because you can do as much as possible, but you have to take assumptions from something and apply it to another. But we can certainly revisit and improve as we continue. So I hope that this has provided some insights into co-design from the perspective of developing a new health behaviour change program, and from a perspective of a government-university partnership. I'd be very happy to share more information about Pod Squad or any of Health and Wellbeing Queensland's programs. So please get in touch if you do have questions, or I'll stay on this webinar for the question section. I'd also encourage you, if you are interested, to find out more if you think this is relevant to people that you work with. I have a QR code on the screen where you can access our communications kit. So I will stop there and hand back to you, Augustina.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Rebecca. That was a really interesting talk. And it was, like you said, it was great to see how you managed a co-design project in that context of, government in partnership with research. And given, the audience that we have here is looking at, how do we do co-design in research, and how do we do co-design in the health system? So this is a really perfect example of how that's done. And I think it looks, successful, and hopefully you get the traction that you want with that program. It seems like it is answering the community's needs, and that you've done all the right things. So just having a look here, no questions in the Q&A or the chat. I'm happy to just go straight to Tim's presentation. And then if anyone has questions or comments, we can do that after Tim's, whether they're for Rebecca or Tim's presentation. So over to you, Tim.
Thank you so much. Um, Rebecca, that's amazing. Like you said, it's not very governmenty type of approach, right? And I've been working in this field for, you know, 20, God, how old am I? 20 odd years. And like there's a handful of solutions that look like that. Like it's very rare that you get the ability to do that. So while that is like amazing and what we call kind of the gold standard of co-design, I've got something a little bit different. I've got what is the carbon fiber of co-design. So um I'll introduce myself. I work for an agency called Web Silk. We're an agency down in Melbourne. Um, we operate out of Camberwell, a beautiful place of the world. If you haven't been, please come visit. If you ever make it to Melbourne, we'd love to host you for a cup of coffee and maybe an umbrella. But right now, today, I'm in Tokyo. So, fortunately or unfortunately, I've been on holidays, and a friend of mine, Mark, asked me if I'd be interested in doing this, and I said I'd love to because our passionate Web Silk is healthcare education and design especially. So the more designery type people we have in the world, the better. So it doesn't matter where I am in the world. If somebody wants to talk about design, I'm more than happy to do so. So my talk is about co-design in 2024 and beyond. So like I said, what Rebecca presented was, the gold standard. If you've got a long runway and you want to do things the absolute best way, that is an amazing, amazing, amazing example. But a lot of the clients that we work with either don't have the time or the money or the access to the people that they need to do that kind of research. So we're always looking for smart ways to apply, different thinking to the types of co-design that we do. So before I get into that, I'll sort of unwind a little bit and I want to talk about, design proper. So when we think about design, we think about design as being an intentional change in a person's environment. And that change can either be building a thing or changing a process or building something, virtual like you've done with the pod. Sorry, I forgot the name of it, but I'll look it up, the pod program. Um, for us, when we think about this intentional change, you also have unintentional change. So things that you've done that have created or forced change on people that they particularly didn't want. And so when it comes to co-design, one of the superpowers that it has is trying to, find those kinks in your armor before you get to the end state, which I think you were talking a lot about, Rebecca, which is, everything that you build, you want to be able to test. So when we think about, the ways that we can approach design, you would have heard a lot of these types of words spun about, right? Like human-centered design and design thinking and co-design and community-led design. We see all these types of design being somewhere in a spectrum. So on the far left, and the easiest form of design is kind of expert design, which is where you engage an agency like us and you get us to make a thing. And this is our least favorite way to design. But what you get is something that's, relatively quick because we don't have to engage stakeholders. And it's usually very pretty because it's almost exactly what you guys want, or you guys being a partner or a stakeholder wants. But inevitably, success is sort of few and far between. As you move down the spectrum towards the right and you start thinking about designing by people, this is where people are stakeholders or own the design themselves. And you can think about this like a warm path through a park like, a dirt path that somebody's worn through a park that goes around the cobblestones or around the footpath on the outside to get from end to end. That's consumers or customers or people wanting something that doesn't exist and creating their own design or their own change of environment. So when we talk about co-design and we're talking about co-design today, we're sort of designing with people, not by people, not for people, but somewhere in the middle, which is with. And it's never exclusively one or the other. You tend to go between designing, looking at something somebody's done, and then pulling them into the design process and designing with them, and then going away from them and doing a bit of expert design and designing for by yourself, and then bringing it back to them and sharing and testing and all of this type of stuff. So, co-design is really important, but don't get too hung up on that. It's all about involving the right number of people in the right way at the right time. So when we think about our approach at Webstill, we've been doing this for a while, 20 odd years. We always involve people, no matter what we're designing, we always involve people at some point or another. So while I do have some cheat codes here, unfortunately, you're always going to have to involve people in some shape or form or another. And we don't think you can do good design most of the time. There are occasions where you can do good design without that, but you should always have some form of person within that design process. Worst case, you're going to have them at the end when they use the product and they're testing it in the real world. Best case, you're using them very early on, so the ideas that and the opportunities that you're pursuing come from that inspiration. So when it comes to us as a design agency, what's really important to understand is that why we do co-design is because we're not experts in whatever it is that we're designing for. We're experts at bringing ideas out of people and facilitating their creation. So like Rebecca said, she's not a child anymore. In an instance where you're designing something for children or for the elderly or for remote communities, you need to engage them and involve them in the design process. And then you need to be able to pull at those threads and get to the bottom and the heart of what are these people really talking about and what do they really want when it comes to the thing that you're trying to create or that change that you're trying to imbue. So traditional process, I won't go through too much, but a traditional process basically looks like preparation. So you're trying to identify who the community is that you're designing for, where they exist, how you're going to engage them, how you're going to remunerate them, how to create a safe space in which they can contribute to the design process. Then obviously we're doing the co-design, so we're engaging them in the design process, and that could be, digital or it could be physical in person. We could be creating services. We could be role playing if it's children. We could be playing with toys, or we could be doing, boring things in spreadsheets if the need persists. And then typically we take that away, and as experts and as designers and with our stakeholders, we do reflection. We try to understand, what were the nuggets here? What can we use and what can we feasibly bring to life? And like Rebecca was saying, this is an iterative process. So we usually go back and we iterate. We go back to our preparation. We think, did we target the right people? Were we missing cohorts? We redesign, we do co-design. Sometimes it's a bit more narrow in its focus because we've got some ideas or some nuggets and opportunities that we want to work through, and we go through multiple times. So for a standard project, we'll do this over a 2 to 3 week period, and we'll do 1 to 3 iterations, at best, going through this process. And that's kind of like a standard process. If you've got longer, if you can engage 300 people, that's amazing. If you can take, 1 or 2 years, that's, like I said, the gold standard. But, the bronze standard, which we normally see, sort of lasts 2 to 3 weeks, and we get 1 to 3 iterations of that sort of design process. However, the world's not perfect, right? So, ultimately our partners have limited budget. You guys working in health, for the 10 to 15 years I've been working in health, if you've got $1 to spend, do you spend the dollar on the hospital bed, or do you spend $1 on a designer from a design agency? The bedside nurse 90% of the time, or the facility 90% of the time, gets the funding. It's very rare that our clients have excessive funding to spend on this type of stuff. Things are changing incredibly, and it's amazing to see. And projects like Rebecca's is an example of that. But in this environment, budgets and time and access is all very, very, very difficult. And these are things that we come up against. We know that iteration creates perfection. Like Rebecca said, she's going to go through a whole nother round of co-design with her product. And we know that you can only launch a product once, but you can improve it forever. But iteration is expensive. And if somebody's just outlaid $100,000 on a design process and you go, this was awesome, but we're going to make it better, give us another chunk of change. Sometimes that's a very hard conversation to have because they feel like they've already done it. It's one and done and it doesn't have to be done anymore. So what can we do? So um, anyone who's been following technology in the last 12 months would have seen ChatGPT or OpenAI or large language models and these types of words thrown about. AI in the last 12 months has come in leaps and bounds. I've been working with technology since I could walk, and I have not seen an explosion like this in a sector in all my time. As an example, you can see, so OpenAI to get to 100 million users took less than 2 months. It took almost 3 years for Instagram to get to that level of success. And when everyone thinks about popular applications like Instagram and TikTok and things like that are sort of hailed as benchmarks, but OpenAI and its adoption has completely blown them out of the water. And the areas in which AI is being used today, and especially in the last sort of 6 months, is just incredible. Like it's in breakneck speed, which is very, very scary and but very, very exciting at the same time. So what does this mean for us? Well, the thing that when it comes to co-design, the thing that we're really, really interested in is large language models. And I don't want to lecture about AI today, but if we can think of large language models as basically prediction machines. So if you give it an input, it will figure out what the next best logical step is. And that could be for audio, for images, for video, or for text. So if you provided a stimulus of, the hat jumped over the, it will make its best prediction and what it thinks it's going to do and say log. However, one of the things that we can do in co-design is we've got a bunch of data that we can apply to this. So we can do something, and I don't want to talk about, too much nerdy stuff, but we can create a RAG, effectively a retrieval augmented generation. So what this means, instead of relying on AI as it comes out of the box, we're going to train it a little bit on our context specific information that we have, and then we can start to play with it in a more effective manner. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. So this is our new approach for co-design that we can start applying with clients that may or may not have budgets or time to spend doing, proper gold standard co-design. So we'll do our preparation the same as before. We'll do a research and co-design piece again with people. Now, what we'll do here is we'll sort of, instead of doing, solely co-design where we're working on problems and solutions and opportunities with our consumers, we'll do a little bit more of the interview side of things. So we'll interrogate our participants a lot more about what they're thinking about and how they're feeling and what they're doing. And as they're doing that co-design process, as they're coming up with ideas and they're telling us what they like and don't like, we'll go a bit deeper again to try and elicit more feedback. Because the more data we have when it comes to AI, the better the outcomes we're going to get. So then we take all of that data, which are going to be pictures from the day, they're going to be videos, audio, most likely a whole bunch of transcripts, and we're going to train the AI. Then when we're doing our analysis of the information those days, we will be doing that with AI. When we're doing co-design, future co-design, we'll be doing that with AI instead of with people. Again, it's not perfect. It's not what we, ideally what we want to do. But in cases where we can't go back to those people because of budgets, or maybe we're doing some research on if somebody's passed away and how we deal with grief, and we don't necessarily want to go back to those people because it was a very difficult conversation, we can reiterate using technology and using AI really, really rapidly. So that reflective and that co-design piece can happen unlimited times. It can happen anywhere we like. And usually we can do this in a much shorter time frame because the analysis and the redesign, the co-design can happen much, much quicker. So we can do these in a shorter time frame, be more cost effective, have unlimited iterations. We won't get anywhere near the standard of quality of the type of stuff that Rebecca's been doing. But, we could probably get close to today around 50 to 60%. And as the pace of technology is going so fast, we see that gap closing much, 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 much more. So Today, I wanted to show you a really quick demo of what does analysis look like using ChatGPT? How do we do co-design? What does creativity look like? And how do we test? Can we get a thumbs up if I've got another 5 minutes to play with? Because I didn't start my timer because I'm foolish. Yep, awesome. Cool. So let's have a look. This could all go horribly wrong because I'm using technology in a foreign country on a foreign computer. I've got to stop screen sharing, new share. All right. Can you guys see this? This should be my ChatGPT interface. Great.
Okay.
So oh, sorry. Somebody said something? No. Okay. So what I've got here is some special models that I have trained for different things. So I've got two that I'll draw your attention to here. Somebody else has been doing some things in here, but it doesn't matter. I've got a PDF indexer here. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have had a look at the Royal Commission into Mental Health. It is bonkers. It is 6,900 pages in the full report of just like amazing material, but there's a lot of it there. One of the things when we think about, these models is instead of reading a PDF, you can talk to a PDF. So what we've done with that one is we've put all of that information into the PDF and then we ask it questions. Hey, we're thinking about doing this. How does that correspond to, things that were identified in the Royal Commission? And it will provide us natural language responses. But today we want to have a look at this one, which is our co-design GPT, which I created last night. So recently we worked with a client, and I'll have to go back to that because I'm very bad. Recently we worked with a client in the mental health space. We did a bunch of co-design with them. We did a bunch of interviews with them. We took here, I've just taken 9 interviews that we've done. We've taken the transcripts of those interviews. So they were audio interviews. We took out the transcripts. We told GPT to ignore the presenter's voice and focus on the consumer's voice in these presentations. Everything needs to be de-anonymized so the GPT doesn't know who they're dealing with. And then we basically then start prompting the GPT with how we want it to behave. So we've told it we want you to present insights. We want to provide recommendations in an engaging and easy to understand manner. We want to reply back to questions in the first person where possible. We want to tell them, I think that, I think this. Don't validate your designs unless unless I ask you, because it always loves to tell you why it's thinking the way it is. Try not to reply with numbered lists, and use stories where possible. So given all that information, what we're going to do today, and this could bomb terribly, and I apologize in advance, but let's have a go. So I'll just dig up this. So I've trained this GPT with the interview notes, and we're going to do our analysis, which is usually our first step of reflection. So I'm asking here, in your opinion, what are the top 3 themes from the interviews that I shared with you? And let's see if GPT is awake today. So it's gone through and it's analyzed all of the interviews and it's telling me some of the information here. And it's telling me access and navigation of services was a challenge, importance of personalized support, impact of social and emotional connection. These reflect the critical thing. So that's really interesting, right? So I've just analyzed what would that be, 10 hours of research, and I've got the 3 key themes here, which is kind of fun, right? So now I'm like, okay, well, let's design something together, Mr. ChatGPT. So I'd like you to help design something that will help with your mental health. What is one thing that we might design together? So we're going to ask it this, and it's going to think about it and think about what the responses were, and it's going to extrapolate. And I don't know what it's going to ask here, so I just have to read it. Sorry. Personalized mental health app. Okay, this app could help users track their mood, activities, personalized tips. That sounds like fun. And connect them directly with support networks or counselors. So this is kind of like the co-design process you would do in person, right? Like you'd sit down with them and you'd talk about their experiences, and then you'd go, okay, well, what might help you in those situations? What do I think about this idea? So what I want to know, like when we're co-designing, what we typically do if we're co-designing with a person, we'll start asking questions to validate the things that they're going to try and tell you. Because whenever you're working with people, they're always going to try and tell you what you want them to hear, what they think they want you to hear. So I'm going to ask it here. Sounds great. When in your life has this been a challenge? Or yeah, let's ask it that. Let's see what it says. There have been times when keeping track of mental health has been challenging, especially during busy or stressful periods. For instance, during times of high stress, like moving to a new city or starting a new job. This is kind of fun. An app could really help these times during these mental reminders and access to support, helping maintain focus on well-being when it gets hectic. It would have been helpful to have a tool that not only reminds you to pause and assess how you're feeling, but also immediate strategies to cope with stress or anxiety. Sounds pretty legit. Okay. So what would our next step be? Our next step may be like, well, let's start designing this because it kind of sounds like it's doing this. So let's design this app. What screens do you think it should have, right? What screens do you think it should have? Designing this mental app, we should consider including, oh, it's kind of bullet. I told you not to do a numbered list. Key screens that address different aspects of well-being and usability. Is it proposed that home screen, a mood tracker screen, an activity log screen, a resources screen, a support network screen? Oh, this is way too many screens. This is very complicated. I think we should just focus on the most important screen. Which one do you think that would be? Focusing on the most critical aspect, the mood tracker screen will most likely be the most important. Okay. Should be designed to be intuitive and engaging, allowing users to quickly log their moods. And so this is, really, really interesting. It's a great insight. Would you like to explore more about how we can design this screen to make it useful and user-friendly as possible? Actually, because I'm running out of time, because I'm short on time, I would love for you to draw me what you think this screen should look like. So again, when we're doing co-design, we'll be talking about stuff, and then we will actually get out, materials, because there is a difference between talking about something and actually physically creating that thing. It engages different parts of people's brains, and just like we would do in person, we would love to see what the GPT is going to do for us. So let's do this. Top section. Oh no, it's can you draw this? Let's see if it can draw this. Quick tags, making it easier. Submit button at the bottom. Okay, sounds good. Visual and colors. Design simplicity. Okay, great. Can you draw this? Oh, sorry. Let's try. Okay. So now it's going to try and think about drawing what this app might look like. This is where we're at so the chat stuff's pretty good, but this is where we're kind of at the 30%, where it hasn't quite figured this stuff out yet. But it's interesting nonetheless to see what it's thinking about. And it's also interesting to validate how it's drawn stuff. Okay. So it's got this app. Here is the design for the mood tracker screen. The mobile app we discussed includes elements you might have wanted, such as emojis, slider intensity. So this is, much more refined, but it's not too dissimilar to something that we would get out of a co-design session if they decided to do a tracker app. It's a soothing color scheme and layout. You can take a look at how this concept has been visually interpreted. That's great. And then you can start again interrogating this. What about the amount of information on the screen? Do you think it's a little overwhelming? And I know I'm leading a question, and we'd probably not do this in a co-design, but we're running out of time, so I'm going to just try and hit it. I also made a spelling mistake, so hopefully it forgives me. Reduce quick tags, and it's given us advice on how we can make this better. So there we go. So we've got the design part of this. Now, the last part of the co-design, what we want to do is we want to do testing. So we want to go, okay, so we've got this thing that we've co-designed, and maybe we want to think about, is it appropriate to the audience that we've got? So we'll hit it with something like this. If you were to evaluate this design against the interviews on a scale of 1 to 10, how much impact do you think it could have, and where could it be improved? Now, this is a really amazing thing to do, because whenever we're designing anything, or building anything or doing anything or painting everything, it's very, very easy to get stuck in the forest and not see the forest for the trees. Because the more you do something and the more you're into something, the harder it is to be objective. And one of the great things that AI allows us to do is it's always going to be objective about what the initial input was. So whatever we come up with, can you reflect on your initial input and tell me whether or not it's fit for purpose? So I would rate its potential impact around 8 out of 10, and here's why. Oh, that's cool. Good user engagement, good accessibility. Personalization would be good. That's interesting. Adaptive content, customizable interface is interesting. Something I wouldn't have thought of at all, which is kind of interesting. Focusing on these areas, especially enhancing personalization in the app, could be a greater impact and resonating more deeply with specific users. So that's kind of fun, right? Um, so I'll stop this share and I'll go back to my, sorry, we're going backwards and forwards a little bit. I'll go back to my keynote. All right. So kind of fun. So what does that all mean, right? Like, sorry, that was a bit of a whirlwind, but what does that all mean? Does it mean we can get rid of people? Absolutely not. So it's a really good approximation and it's a great tool to use for design teams to be able to co-design constantly in a project. So there are moments in time where you go, oh man, I really wish I had have asked when we were doing the co-design session or the interviews this question to these people. And this gives you the ability to do a bit of time travel and go back and do that. Um, it allows you to do so without cost and compliance issues again, because sometimes when you're talking to people, there's a long lead up to get compliance to be able to talk to those people. To be able to ask that question again requires weeks of, getting release forms and finding those people and finding a time and flying around. Whereas this, you can ask that question, get an approximation back straight away. The more data we have, the more quality outputs we're going to get. So this was pretty good on, 10 interviews. If we had 300 interviews, this would be absolutely mind-blowingly, crazily good. But however, privacy is a big concern. So whenever you're doing this stuff, a lot of the large language models exist overseas. There are ways that you can get around that. There is work that you can do. If you are concerned about privacy and your data being sent overseas, I would recommend engaging a professional agency to create a local LLM so that the data doesn't leave our geography. And then also the chat sometimes gets lost and repetitive if it is not creative. You saw at the start, I told it not to give me bulleted lists or numbered lists because it loves to do that. It falls back into bad habits sometimes, and occasionally it just completely goes crazy. But every release, every month, it's getting better and better. So we're not at Terminator 2 level yet, but we're heading in that direction. So that's kind of it for me. I really appreciate your time and your patience listening to me that. I know it was a little bit different and left of field, but I thought it was kind of interesting to sort of compare, what Rebecca was talking about. Again, that sort of amazing gold standard. But what are the opportunities for organizations and for our partners who potentially don't have such long lead times and such large budgets, and even for organizations that do have that? And how can you apply, some of this sort of thinking and get a bit more bang for your buck? But I would encourage you, if you'd love to have a chat about this stuff or anything else design related, even if I'm overseas, I'll have a chat. Add me on LinkedIn and I'll hopefully connect with you guys later.
Thanks so much, Tim. That was such a fantastic presentation. And I really like like you said, Rebecca's example was a real, gold standard. How do we do a full co-design process? All the different stages. And I really enjoyed the alternative with AI. Actually scary, but also really exciting. You said, will this replace people? Hopefully not. But I really like that, if you have a group who's a bit hesitant or who doesn't have the resources or the time to do co-design, then this could be a good alternative for them. Any questions or comments for the audience before? I know Rebecca needs to leave soon. Or just comments. Otherwise, if there's no questions or comments, I'd be happy to just close the session. Rebecca, do you want to say a closing
I'll
word?
just say thank you, Tim. That was fascinating. And I look forward to looking into this more as well because it offers so much potential. So really appreciate your time.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for like getting the Queensland government to take design seriously. Like the project that you've done is incredible. To get 300 interviews is, nothing short of remarkable for a government like that to engage with. So I'd love to hear how you did that because I think, to be honest, that's going to be more difficult than putting together this AI solution. I swear to God.
Mhm.
Oh, thanks, Tim. And thanks, Agustina.
Oh, no worries. Look, I'll just close the session now. Just a reminder, let me just share my screen again. Just a reminder that this is week 2 of a series of webinars. If I can click. We have a webinar again next week, looking at co-design processes in research with First Nations people. So we have 2 fantastic projects that are going to be shared with us. And then we have a week after that one to wrap up the series. And I am in discussion with Don, who missed out on today. And we might just record his chat and put it on our website as well, just so everyone has the opportunity to hear what he had to say around this topic. The webinars are recorded and they will be housed on the HTSA website, like every other webinar on the Spotlight series. So you can share with others who might be interested in this topic. So I will now close the session. Thanks everyone for attending. Thank you to our speakers again for some fantastic presentations, and hope this was helpful for everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.